Hi, this is Natasha, and we're back on my podcast, White Noise Level 3 podcast, and we have a really special guest, Edward Dentzel. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, Natasha. This is Ed Dentzel, and I host the Missing Persons program, Unfound.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit about Unfound for somebody that hasn't heard of it? Your presence on YouTube, how you do your weekly shows, your weekly episodes, your quarterly updates, and things like that.
Sure. I started the program about 5 years ago, and it's a missing persons program exclusively. The episodes come out every Friday over the past 5 years. We've covered about 225 disappearances. And some of those have been solved since we've covered them. I'm not going to say that Unfound had a lot to do with some of them being solved, but I think that we've definitely raised the profile of all the disappearances that we've covered. So that is the main podcast. Everything comes out from the episodes that come out every Friday. But since then, I started a YouTube live show. First it was on Facebook. And now it is on YouTube, on the Unfound Podcast Channel on YouTube, Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. And in fact, thinking back, I think it started on Tuesdays on Facebook Live. And then I think at the beginning of 2019 is when we moved to YouTube, I think. And then along the way, I started a newsletter. It comes out the first of every month. That's been on maybe a couple years now. That I read about 4,000 words a month about what's going on with the program, things that I've observed and things behind the scenes, and I let people know some of the disappearances episodes that are going to be coming up in the coming weeks. And what else do I do? Unfound Now, which is a monthly program. I started that the summer of 2020, and that is a monthly video program where I discuss very recent disappearances. Whereas on the regular episodes, the rule is that a disappearance has to be a year old before we will cover it on the regular Friday episodes. Whereas Unfound Now gives me the opportunity to talk about recent disappearances, so within a few months. So here we are in September of 2021, and I have another Unfound Now episode that's going to be coming out here probably within the next week. And so I'll be looking at any disappearances, maybe going back to July. And if there's one that I think is a good one to cover, one that I think I can teach some missing persons theory to the public, use that to teach missing persons theory, then I will pick that one out. What else? You're on Patreon. I have a think tank that we do every Sunday evenings that's exclusive to Patreon members. Natasha, I never could have expected 5 years ago that 5 years in, we have all these different things, and then just, you just pick up one thing, then another thing, then another thing, then another thing, and then we have books. And as you know, Natasha, I've picked up about 6 volunteer assistants along the way. So it's just kind of snowballed. None of this, I would say, is planned. It's just kind of been the way it's gone.
Oh, that sounds great. I also noticed on your YouTube channel that you have something called On the Ground.
Yes, that is a program that is, at least when it is done live, it is exclusive for premium Patreon members, which means the $12 a month level and above, where my assistant Eric Grabowski, Dr. Eric Grabowski, talks about different missing persons issues every month. And then what happens is that is recorded, and premium Patreon members get to take part in it, and then a month later, before the next Unfound On the Ground comes out, that one is made public so that everybody may listen to the discussion. And that is something I think we're on must be about a year now, because that's about monthly too. So I'm guessing we started that sometime during the summer of 2020 as well, right around the same time that Unfound Now started. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember any of the subject matter of On the Ground? Anything that he talks about?
Well, it's been, 12 episodes now. We've talked, I know that he's discussed, and once again, I just oversee it. Eric is the one that comes up with the different topics, but some that come to mind are missing persons cases from history. We've talked about that, talking about the history of missing persons cases up to the present day, and also he's discussed laws regarding missing persons cases, laws that have come out of missing persons cases. Also did one on how to research, going to databases, and actually on our website, the unfoundpodcast.com, we do have a link called Data Gems, where you can go and see all the links that we use, some of the databases we use to research disappearances. Those are a few of the topics that come to mind.
Oh, okay. Well, from my standpoint, I went from just listening to your episodes to participating in the think tank and then reading your blogs afterwards. And it's just been such a wonderful experience of discovery, because when I listen to the episode, then every Sunday I know that I can talk to you through live chat and a group of like-minded Patreon subscribers. And then you go through like actual guided questions at the end. Well, what do you think really happened? So It goes like way beyond just the experience of listening to the episode by yourself. You really feel like you're more part of the community. And then the actual blog is fairly thick. I mean, it isn't fluff reading at all. I mean, quite the contrary. So one of the things that I remember, now that I've read it, it's like, well, yeah, of course. But when you state it, it said, for one of the cases, well, you know that people that are drunk can't swim. And then it's true. Like, no, they can't. And then that has a lot of weight on what may or may not have happened on the case. So it's full of little things like that.
Yeah, if the listeners are wondering where that comes from, your listeners are wondering, is there is what I would call a hoax out there called the smiley face killer hoax. And it's been about, of course, some people would call it a theory. I call it a hoax. But it's been about 13, 14 years that it's been out. In fact, I can remember where I lived when I first heard about it. But this is well before I did Unfound. And there's this idea that there's this roving band of marauders or something, or just cruising the streets of towns and cities across the United States looking for drunk people who are walking home to then abduct them and then throw them in a body of water so they drown or something like that. And there's no proof of this. Whereas there is plenty of proof that drunk people can't swim, and drunk people make stupid decisions, and drunk people can't walk straight, and drunk people make decisions that us sober people can't understand. There's plenty of proof of that. There's no proof that there's a group out there doing this. So I don't know why so many people, once again, are so surprised that drunk people can't swim. Mm-hmm. That's where that came from. I don't know exactly what disappearance I first said that on, or where I wrote that the first time in a blog. But yes, that is one of my sentences.
Okay. Great. So another thing that I've learned along the way is, it's something that is still surprising and shocking to me. You're more likely, people like you in the general sense, you're more likely to disappear if you're in a relationship.
That's totally true. Now, of course, there are a lot of factors there. Obviously, if you are a single person who is making other bad choices, if you are into drugs, if you are a criminal, if you're tempting fate with certain aspects of your life, then obviously the odds of you disappearing, whether through foul play or not, greatly increase. Mm-hmm. But if you take a single person who is making good choices, just isn't in a close romantic relationship for whatever reason, and then you take that same exact person, but he or she is in a romantic relationship, whether living together or married, doesn't matter, your sexuality or anything like that. There's no doubt that your odds of going missing increase. Why? Because the number one cause of disappearances are relationships. Yes.
Wow. So people that are single out there, that's one positive.
Yes, I know a little bit about being single. That's true. Yeah.
So thanks for that. As you've been doing this for so long, have you noticed any notable trends in both missing person cases and also how your audience is reacting or receiving, receptive to your episodes?
I will tell you, it's been interesting for me is that, and your listeners should know, I have no background in law enforcement. I'm not a private investigator. I don't have a private investigator's license. I've thought about getting one at one time or another. Probably not going to do so. It's a fairly rigorous process here in Florida. But for me, missing persons cases, although I've been interested in them for a long time, is just because that's the way my mind worked, going back to when I was a child. But even in the last 5 years, even though I thought I knew a lot about missing persons cases when I started doing the program, I really discovered that I really didn't know a lot, and then even some of what I knew was wrong. And so even myself, I continue to be educated. I like to educate the listeners, but I continue to be educated. And probably the biggest surprise for me in the last 5 years is that I've learned that there are more people walking off out of their lives and disappearing than I probably ever could have guessed.
Okay.
That is probably the number one thing that has been most surprising to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still inclined to believe that a large majority of the disappearances we've covered on the program, there is foul play of one type or another, or some sort of cover-up. But I'm also struck by how many probably are walk-offs once you really start getting into the details.
Okay. So along the lines of the smiley face killer phenomena that just kind of sprouted up all of a sudden with the show and everything. I know that you're really careful with how you deal with the families of the missing, because they're obviously traumatized and they're going through a hard time and they're never going to be the same again after such a huge loss. And that you're very, very careful with a lot of aspects about it. Can you name some examples? And you don't have to actually name the shows, but maybe some trends of people trying to cash in on, the true crime dollar sign that's happening right now?
I'm not going to get into naming any other programs or trash any other programs. I'm not going to. I would never do that. At least publicly. I would rather just talk about, there are things that I see, but I would never call anybody out, any other host or anything like that. I do think that there are people involved in true crime podcasting who are only in it because it's popular.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's obvious to me. Once again, I'm not going to try to call anybody out, but given that I know that I'm not in it for that reason, because when I started Unfound, I didn't even know how popular true crime podcasting is.
Okay.
All right, I didn't even know that. And to this day, as I talk about quite often, which I think is the opposite of what other hosts do, I don't keep track of the numbers for Unfound. I don't keep track of downloads, plays, likes, shares. The program is going to get done one way or the other no matter what. I don't keep track of reviews. I don't keep track of where the program is on iTunes or any. I haven't been on the iTunes site, and this earpiece keeps falling out. I haven't been on the iTunes site in years to even look at what the reviews are and phone, because the program's going to get done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is that I think my impression is that too many podcast hosts are caught up in the numbers, and they're not, and I think that distracts from actually paying attention. I don't know how you pay attention to both. How can you be serious about covering the program, a disappearance or any kind of crime seriously, but on the other hand, you're starting to worry about, well, how is this looking to the public? Are they listening? Are they downloading and everything else? You cannot, a host cannot have two masters.
Right.
And so my master is the case itself. My master is not the numbers.
Okay.
That's what I would say that. But I'm not going to get into naming the programs or hosts or anything. I will tell you that, for example, I'll go the exact opposite direction. I've had an opportunity to work with a guy like John Lorden who does Brain Scratch on YouTube, and he's doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I will just talk about people who I think are doing things the right way. I'm not going to get into people who I don't think are doing things the right way.
Okay, because the reason why I mentioned it, the first thing that comes to mind, and I think it's just my sense, or maybe something that you spoke about in one of your lives, but it seems like a true crime podcaster will go through quite a bit of research and talk about a specific, missing person or a case, but either they weren't allowed or they didn't make the effort to reach out to the families and to get their interview or their input. And then with you, we're so spoiled because that's all you do. That's all you do is talk about the families. So for me, it's a little strange, not to do that.
Well, I am reminded, and it's been a few years, but this is just how stark it is to me, is that I remember when Nico Lisi's mother, Monica, he disappeared in Franklin, Tennessee. That's a disappearance I think they covered back in 2018, but the reason she came on Unfound is because she was so ticked off at so many programs, not just podcasts, but TV shows, other newspaper articles or wherever. They're covering Nico's disappearance and never consulting her, never contacting her. That's the reason she came on Unfound, because she was like, well, I want to get the word out about what's really going on, and here's this guy doing this program called Unfound, and he does interviews, and he'll talk to me, and he'll let me say what I need to say. And I don't know if the true crime world in general knows how much it ticks them off, families off, when they cover crimes and these people are not consulted. I'm not sure that is something that is very well known. I know it because that's what I do. And I think in one vein, they like the coverage, but what happens in those situations, my observation, my opinion, is that when you don't talk to the people who have been experiencing it from day one, then errors, mistakes, things continue to get recycled because the people who actually have the information, you're not going to the source. You're just going to Wikipedia or web sleuths, and things may be wrong there.
Right.
It's very possible. And so that's how I'll come across disappearance that's 20 years old, and there's still facts out in the public that are wrong, which is startling to me. But I think it's because the same information gets done over and over.
Okay. All right. Well, it's something, just to go back to something that you just said, and I'm trying to process it myself. So of course I could be completely wrong about this, but it seems that there could be a tendency that more people are choosing to go missing, and it's something that's planned and they just walk out of their lives. But that can also be very destructive to the people that they're leaving behind. So the way that I see it, it's almost in a similar vein as trying to tell somebody, well, try not to commit suicide, like, is there something that I can tell you not to do that, or not to hurt yourself, or not to become an addict? I mean, it's kind of like on the same line with me. So is there something that you can say to the people that might be listening that are considering walking off, or not?
I don't know if, first of all, I don't know if they're going to listen to me.
Right.
I'm just some stranger out here. What I would say is that we don't know the state of mind that they are in when they leave. Okay, we can talk about on the program their last conversations, their last interactions on social media, their last text. We can talk about all of those things, but none of us really know what is in that person's head that second they make that decision.
Right.
Okay? We can make some probably educated guesses, but I don't know if any of us really know. the issue also is that even if we knew, I don't know if that would make sense to us or not.
Mm-hmm.
The way I would think about it is, I think this has a lot to do with, it does seem to me, I'm 51 years old, as I've talked about many times, the suicide rate in the United States since I was born in 1970 has greatly increased.
Okay.
Especially among women. They haven't caught up to men yet, but the suicide rate has greatly increased. So as the murder rate has gone down, the suicide rate is going up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The number of people, the percentage of people on antidepressants and monitoring drugs to try to get their, bipolar disorder, all of this stuff seems to have increased in the last 50 years.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it didn't exist back then. Maybe a bunch of people maybe going untreated. I'm certainly open to that. But it certainly seems that here in the 21st century that we have more people who need more drugs to get through their days every day. And I don't mean illegal drugs like heroin. We can talk about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But just drugs that have been approved by doctors and experts and the FDA and everything else. And that, to me, that can't help either.
Okay.
And then on top of everything else, we have way more addicts, drug addicts, both of legal and illegal drugs, than we did when I was born in 1970. Even though like the 60s and 70s were seemed like the drug, we have way more addicts now, a higher percentage now. I think that all contributes to the percentage of people who now seem to walk off, in contrast to people who disappeared due to foul play or accidents.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. The other thing that you mentioned, we know that you don't look at stats, but is there anything that you want to share on any recent traffic growth of Unfound?
I can't talk about that. Just coincidentally, within the last few weeks, Unfound was featured on Amazon's Hidden Gem section. I had nothing to do with that. I found out kind of like everybody else. In fact, it was one of the listeners, actually a person who helps with the program, that let me know that was going to be the situation. It's certainly, like I said, I really don't pay attention to the numbers, but when something like that pops up, I'm of course interested to know, is that going to have effect? What kind of, does it even matter? Mm-hmm. And it certainly seems like it mattered.
Great.
It certainly seemed like it.
All right.
Once again, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't email anybody or anything like that. That's just something like that.
Great. That sounds good. So you also cover international cases. Many people love to travel to foreign countries. What are the special considerations to note if you or a loved one goes missing abroad?
We've covered a few. One in Angola, which is a very, very unique disappearance. The disappearance of Ben Charles Padilla. He and the jet went missing. I don't know if anybody would really be able to relate to that. And then we've covered some disappearances in Canada, which is like the United States, except they use meters. They use the metric system. What I would say is that if you were an American going to another country that has a very different culture, mm-hmm. not going to Canada, but maybe to Mexico, maybe
right.
going to Europe, the language is different and all these other things, the way they handle the law and all this. If you go missing, if you think it's difficult to solve the disappearance of an American in the United States, try solving the disappearance of an American in a different country.
Right.
And what I would say to anybody who is traveling abroad, don't take any chances. Don't think that because you're in a touristy spot that nothing can happen to you. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would love to cover a couple disappearances from the country of Ireland. We have a huge listenership, by the way, in Ireland. Mm. And there have been a couple disappearances in the city of Dublin that I would love to cover. Trevor Dealey and John Johnson. Now, Trevor Dealey is actually an Irishman who disappeared like 21 years ago, a young man. But John Johnson was on what they call it on holiday. We call it on a vacation here in the United States. He was on a vacation, was with his wife or fiance. They flew from Iceland to Dublin. He disappears 2 days after he's there. He's just walking in the city of Dublin, broad daylight, disappears.
Huh.
So, and that's been a couple years, 2.5 years now. So, I don't know what happened there, but I would say to anybody, you're going to a different country, a different culture, do not make it hard on your family by making bad choices and disappearing.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I think it might be correct to assume that things that would be normal here as far as CSI, crime scene investigations, things like that, discovery, access to records and investigations should not be taken for granted, because in a different country it could just be a completely different way of handling the crime, if at all.
Yeah, I guess it would just depend where you go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to countries that have a law system similar to ours, where people have their rights and you can get lawyers and you can't illegally search and seizure and things like that. That's one thing. But if you're going on a vacation to different countries, which although they are tourist spots, their laws are very, very different from what you're used to, then who knows what you can get into.
Right. Alrighty. Since you've covered so many cases, you've been doing this full time for 5 years. Do you know of any existing stereotypes of the average missing person or missing person case that you'd like to talk about?
Well, there certainly are different types of disappearances. Is that what you mean, Natasha? Different types of disappearances, or maybe, or do you mean stereotypes in people? Some things people public thinks about disappearances that aren't necessarily true.
Any of those that you want to talk about more? I was actually thinking, do missing person cases cover the entire socioeconomic strata? So rich people, poor people, all races. It touches everyone.
Disappearances, I would say, touch everybody.
Okay.
We've covered the disappearances of people who, both men and women, had no drug issues, no job issues, no monetary issues, no vices, nothing. On the other hand, we've gone totally to the opposite spectrum, where people had criminal issues, and in fact, at the time of their disappearance, the police were after them. In fact, getting chased in one particular case. Brennan Smokey is a disappearance that comes to mind. He was in a car chase with police, jumped out of a car, ran off into the woods. He still hasn't been found. So it runs the gamut. Anybody can go missing at any time. Now, as far as how law enforcement treats these disappearances, I would say certainly the people who the police are familiar with because of their run-ins with the law, my perception is that the police take those types of disappearances less seriously.
Okay.
However, having said that, I can tell you there are a lot of well-off people, well-off parents, who I think, and them being on the program, they have a lot of reason to complain too about how the law enforcement treated the disappearance of their loved ones. So it just varies, but I would say that if you are a young woman who has an addiction, a sex worker, possibly you were sex trafficked, something like that, and you go missing, my guess is law enforcement, although they'll take the report and they'll, do this, do that, probably not going to get as much attention as Gabby Petito did recently.
Okay. No, that we've all heard about Gabby Petito. I can see your point. All right. So just changing topics here. For example, three 20-something female dog walkers go missing on the same street within 1 week. So just the term serial killer or serial abductor comes to mind. However, with the ease of mobility we have in this country, how can we identify a serial abductor who just hops around the country? It's so easy to do, and can we? I mean,
Well, what I would say my experience is just because I know this is going, once again, to the public, this is going to sound crazy, but I can give you another example from Unfound's experience. Just because three dog walkers go missing on the same block in a week does not mean they're all connected.
okay.
I know that sounds crazy to people, but I would give you the example of five young men who went missing in San Francisco within a few years of each other, all within a few blocks of each other. Five.
Wow.
This is real. This isn't some theoretical example. This is real.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron Remmer, am I going to be able to name all the names? Sean Seedy, Christian Hughes, Jackson Miller, and I can't remember the last one.
That's okay. We get your point.
I'm so embarrassed. But there were five of them: Jackson Miller, Christian Hughes, Cameron Remmer, Sean Seedy. Can't remember the other. But they all went missing. If you all look at them, they're all very similar situations. They all went missing within a few blocks in San Francisco of each other. To the outside person, oh, it must be connected.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Being the San Francisco is the way it is. Are these young men all gay? Did they get into the sex scene there? And were they all murdered by some serial killer who was preying on gay men? And so I decided to take a look at this a few years ago. First of all, to my knowledge, none of them were gay.
Okay.
But in looking at the details, and I've covered two of those disappearances for the program, Cameron Remmer and Jackson Miller, it's clear to me that none of them are connected
Okay.
in any way. And even though it has been portrayed in the media as they are probably connected. In fact, any article you've seen written about one of them includes all of them.
Oh, okay.
But I would say that none of them are connected. They all had connected. They all had their own things going on, and
It's just coincidence.
Different reasons for each of their disappearances. So getting back to your example, we would have to know more about the women. We have to know more about their patterns. Did they always go out walking at that time? What else was going on in their lives? Were they having relationship problems? Did any of them complain about getting stalked before? There's a whole host of other things that you would have to do to ever even believe that these three disappearances can be connected. That would not be enough, in my opinion, to connect all three.
Okay. Okay. Can you think of any case where you think the wrong person was convicted for a missing person case?
You mean of the ones that Unfound has covered?
Either one.
I don't want to stray too outside too far my area of expertise. I certainly know a lot about missing persons cases in general, but when we start getting into disappearances that we've not covered on the program, it gets into a little bit of gray territory for me.
Okay.
As far as the unfound disappearances in which they have been solved, in which there was foul play, I am 100% sure that those suspects who have gone to jail or are going to go to jail probably because their trials are coming up, I'm pretty sure they did it.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Along those lines. Go ahead.
But I'm not saying that wrongful convictions don't happen. You can look up the murder. It's a murder. I just happen to know this from years ago. But you can look up Raymond Lee Jennings, who spent 10 years in jail in California for a murder that he surely did not commit.
Okay.
So you can look that up.
Okay. So along those lines, now we're speaking to the investigators at home. Can you think of 3 actions by the average person that have moved cases forward? And if it isn't 3, I mean, it could just be 1. Or and then can you talk about Eric Franks, please?
Some of the things that I've seen that people have done with disappearances that have been covered on the program. For example, right now I have a listener who I've been counseling behind the scenes. She has gotten very deeply involved in the disappearance of Rebecca Gary, a woman who went missing over 30 years ago in Louisiana. And she was able to get the police reports that the family had never seen, was able to get those reports to Rebecca's family. And some new avenues of inquiry are now going on right now, over 30 years later.
That's great.
So that's something that comes to mind in a kind of a different vein, although this is a very controversial disappearance, death now that has been covered on Unfound. A lot of people got involved with the disappearance and then death of Tom Brown in Canadian Texas. People who never knew him have certainly gotten involved, wanting to seek justice. The issue is that we're still not sure what happened. Did somebody kill him? Did he commit suicide? Was there an accident? Because his remains were eventually found, but no cause of death was determined. So we can think about people getting involved in a way such as that. As far as a third example, I know some of my assistants. For example, my assistant Cherie, she has become very close to the sister of Amanda Frabel, who went missing in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the late 1980s, and that's a disappearance we covered way back summer of 2018. And Cherie continues to keep in contact with Melissa, Amanda's sister, and we're just still hoping that one of these days that disappearance will be solved. So there have been several instances since the program got started where just your common person who has a regular job out there hears something on the program and then decides to get more involved than they've ever been involved before in any sort of any kind of crime or disappearance.
Okay, and then what happened with Eric Franks? Somebody looked up his car?
That's exactly right. To my knowledge, it had nothing to do with Unfound, but 10 years ago, Eric Franks went missing from Saginaw, Michigan. He and his car went missing, which is a very rare combination. I think we've only covered about less than 10 disappearances like that out of 225. But everybody, including myself, we were all convinced this car was long gone, whether pushed into a lake or parted out or something like that. And it turned out in 2020 that his car was discovered in one piece, and in fact it was in running condition, and it had been hidden in an older gentleman's garage for the last 10 years. And the way that was discovered is that occasionally a person who had taken an interest in Eric Franks' disappearance way back when it started somehow had the VIN to his car, and every once in a while this person would go into Carfax and see if the car ever popped up. Kept getting no information. Then did it this time. It turned out that the car had gotten an oil changed in Ohio.
Wow.
And they, from there, this person sent that information to law enforcement. Was able to track down who then owned the car, and the guy was able to say how he came into possession of it. And because of this, we now know for sure that Eric Franks, there was certainly foul play in his disappearance. Unfortunately, one of those people who was responsible for it is now deceased.
Okay. So it happens, just the regular person can really move cases forward.
Yes, sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that you dedicated this show to your mom. And that's I think we all universally love our moms. So going to that, I'll give some examples first from my end, but I was wondering if your mom had any really heartfelt sayings that you think about every once in a while. Like, for example, my grandmother on my mother's side, my abuelita, I remember her saying this all the time. She would say, if given a choice, just do things correctly, and whatever that means to you. And I think she meant more from a societal or from a manners perspective, but that could go for anything. So it's like, well, just do the right thing, just do things correctly. And this is more along the lines of Unfound. My mom always says to me, or just says in general, it only takes once. So, yeah, I mean, if you went missing, that was that one time. So it's just those, familial sayings. Does she have anything like that just, pops into your head?
I would not say that my mother, Loretta Dentzel, was much of a wordsmith. I would say she was more of a woman of action. She liked planning parties. She liked going to the casino and things. And in fact, when it came to her use of the English language, she took great pride in mispronouncing words and things.
Okay.
Very much unlike her son, I might add. And so she was not, I would say, anything like that. Any really, the only thing that has nothing to do with the program or anything. Probably one of the funniest things she ever said was that we're going way back. Must have been early 1980s. She and myself and my dad were playing Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was very competitive. She did not like to lose.
Okay.
And that's also a trait that I picked up from her. And she lost. And she says, well, I'm going to go cry in the closet. So that's what she did. So
oh,
that is in a nutshell is Loretta Dentzel. Just one of the most giving women who has ever been on this earth. But I'm also here to tell you, she was a hard ass. You did not want to mess with her.
okay.
No way. Like I said, as I continue to say, there's only one person I've ever been afraid of in my life, and that was my mother.
Oh, wow.
She's a sweetheart. Lots of friends, love to hold parties, go places, give stuff to people. Very, very generous.
Mm-hmm.
But to the people that she was closest to, she was a hard ass, and I think that she got that from her father and my grandfather.
Okay, great. So it's definitely the memory of your mom and exposing and trying to solve missing person cases. I'm assuming that's what helps get you out of bed in the morning. Do you do anything to kind of let off some steam? I mean, you're doing this full time. Is there anything that you're doing to kind of balance out a work life?
Well, I try to. Everybody knows that on the live shows on Wednesday nights, I start off the program talking about my disc golfing. That is my main physical pursuit. I've been doing that for a while now, and I've been struggling with some mental concentration issues out of the course for quite a while, but it seems like within the last year it's gotten better. However, I decided I was going to see a sports psychologist about it, even though it's just a hobby for me.
Mm-hmm.
But like my mother, I like to win.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I realized the reason I'm not winning is not the physical side, but it's the mental side. So I'm not sure if that helps me blow off any steam or not, because I take it so dang seriously.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I have to admit that I always, there was a time in my life where I had what you might call, a regular job.
Okay.
Getting up in the morning, going to work, working for somebody else, and putting in that time, waiting for those 2 or 3 weeks of vacation that you get every year, and 401k plans and all these things. And I had an opportunity. That's why I'm like a jack of all trades. I've done so many different kinds of jobs in my life. But what I always really wanted probably was the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something where I was going to be working. I know this sounds so crazy, but I wanted something where I wanted to work on it 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And not necessarily 8 or 10 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
but I was so motivated by it that I knew I was going to be putting in a lot of hours, but I got to decide when those hours were going to be spent.
Okay.
And so it's like I said, it's always been a little bit different from me than other people. And this is so when it comes to doing this program and the time that I put into it and everything, it's not really a job. It's not. I put a lot of hours into it and everything, but I do get maybe a little stressed out about it once in a while. But here we are doing this interview on Saturday, and after we're done, even though it's a Saturday, we're going to be going into Saturday evening and everything. I'm going to be working on Unfound for the rest of the night.
Okay.
I'm going to be here at home, writing, doing a few things that I need to do, even though it's a Saturday night, and I don't feel bad about it at all.
Okay.
So when it comes to taking time away from the program and blowing off steam or anything like that, I really don't think about it in those terms.
Okay. All right. Um, so this is kind of a two-part question, and then we'll wrap it up as far as the Unfound stuff. So, is there anything that you would want to say if someone is listening who's a family member of a missing person, just in general, or maybe how they can contact you to be on the program?
Well, to contact me, the easiest way to do that is at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. I check that email all the time, even when I wake up and sleepy like 3 in the morning. I'll check that email on my phone. That's a true story. But what I would also say, if a disappearance has already occurred in your family, then you always have to be very honest about who that missing person is and what was going on in that person's life at the time. It helps no one if you try to put a facade on that person that isn't true.
Okay.
If this person had addictions, then you need to talk about that. And then if it is believed this person went missing because of that, this can then be something that other people can learn from, so it doesn't happen to them. All these disappearances that have been covered on Unfound, we certainly want them all solved.
Right.
But Unfound is also about the educational aspect, not just the audience who is listening, but other families who may come across it.
Mm-hmm.
That you just need to be very honest about who this person is and what they were doing and everything else. And don't get so caught up in that. I'll give you an example. I can't tell you how many. It's more than the public would ever know.
Okay.
We would never talk about this type of thing in an official interview, but many of my guests want to believe that their daughters and sons went missing because they're in the witness protection program.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, on the public, I don't believe there's one disappearance I've ever covered that has anything to do with the witness protection program. But I think this is one of the ways that families, they put up, and I would call it maybe like a little bit of a barrier, that emotional barrier.
Sure.
Well, they went missing because of this, and they're out there living this good life, and they can't get in touch with me, but that's not helping anybody else.
Okay.
The disappearance is going to get solved, hopefully one way or the other, no matter what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But these people lying to themselves does not help.
Right.
It doesn't help anybody, including themselves. They have to be very honest about these things. When they bring it up, I always ask them, well, did this person ever testify in a trial? Did they know about any huge crime conspiracy in the United States? And those answers are usually no.
Okay.
So that's what I would tell them. And that's why on the program, when we do these interviews that I do, we are always very honest about who these missing people are. We're not here to beat it into the ground that that this guy had an addiction or lost a job because of this or that reason. But we know at this point that these can be contributing factors to a disappearance. So people need to know about this stuff.
Okay, great. Well, my last question is if you have any exclusive announcements that we haven't heard of anywhere else. It's the first time here on this episode of anything, anything exclusive that you want to say.
Any exclusivity on? I think I can tell you right now that the next there's a program that I do with Dr. Telesco from Nova Southeastern University in Florida, and in fact I'm going to be going down there to speak in November. But that's not exactly news. I've been talking about that for a while. But I can tell you that our next show that we're going to do at the end of October, we are going to be discussing the disappearance of Jason Landry, which actually is an Unfound Now episode that I did back in January.
Okay.
So this will be the first time that I will be discussing an Unfound Now disappearance on Dr. Telesco's program. And Jason Landry, everybody can look it up. It's one of those stumpers. We started off this program talking a little bit about people walking off, and it seems that he did walk off. I'm not saying he was in the right state of mind when he did so, but he was in a car wreck. There are reasons to believe maybe he had some sort of head injury. And despite numerous searches in Texas, right around where his car was wrecked, a one-car wreck, he's not been found. And so unless he is found either alive or deceased between now and the end of October, Dr. Telesco and I will be discussing his disappearance on the show.
Another case with a car.
It is, yeah. The car didn't. Yeah, this one, the car did not go missing. It was right there, slammed up against the fence, and no idea why he lost control of the car. No idea exactly on why he was on a road that he shouldn't have been on if he was driving home from college. These questions are still still a lot of question marks in that case. Even though we're going to be coming up on the year anniversary of this.
Okay, great. That was the exclusive. You heard it first here on White Noise Level 3 podcast. We definitely wanted to thank you for your time, and looking forward to following your program in the future. I'm so happy that you're going to continue doing this, because if you look at my resume, it's like, oh, I'll do this, oh, and then I'll try this. But
well, I was like that for a long time. I will tell anybody that wants to hear it that I have failed at so many things in life, and you just don't even know. So there should be no sadness in that. Jumping around from here, from this to that. I certainly believe that everybody has his or her place to do something important if you're willing to give it a chance.
Thank you, Edward. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, Natasha, I'd like to thank you for all the help that you've given to Unfound on your own. It's been a pleasure. I think we've known each other maybe for almost 2 years now, and I appreciate all the support you give the program.
Oh, my pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you so much, Edward.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.